Hey guys, tonight we're rolling out of our cozy beds, away from our thermostats and indoor plumbing, and straight into the cold, crusty nightmare that was life as a medieval soldier. Not the knight in shining armor stuff, not the guy galloping into battle with dramatic music playing. No, we're talking about the regular foot soldier, the muddy, half-frozen, mostly miserable grunt who spent more time trying not to die from exposure than actually swinging a sword. Forget the epic battlefield speeches and heroic slow-motion sword fights. This isn't glory, this is blisters, dysentery, and trying to sleep next to a guy who hasn't bathed since last summer. This is trench rot with a side of stale bread. This is history's least relaxing camping trip with extra blood and way fewer marshmallows. So, before you lie back, maybe toss an extra blanket on the bed. Or crank up that heater, because tonight you're not a warm, safe modern human. You're a medieval soldier. And the good news, you haven't been stabbed yet. The bad news, you still have to make it through the night. Let's begin. You wake up to screaming, not the fun kind, the get up or die kind. Welcome to a medieval military camp, where the concept of sleeping in is as fictional as hygiene. There's no alarm clock here, just a trumpet that sounds like it's dying, a sergeant with lungs like a war horn, and the distant soul-cruppening a blade. Your bed dirt, or if you're lucky, a thin blanket over mud that's been politely fermenting under your body all night. Maybe tears, straw, but it's the kind of straw that comes with bugs and weird smells, and possibly the ghost of the drowned rat. You didn't sleep well, not because of dreams, but because you were too busy shivering, listening for enemy thief, steps, and wondering on if the guy next to you was dead, or due. It's really bad at snown. Ring. It's cold, not forgot my jacket cold. It's my toes are numb and my breath looks like smoke from hell. Cold, your hands barely work, your joints are locked in angles they were never meant to hold, and when you finally do try to sit up, your spine makes a noise like a church pew under emotional stress. You look around and realize everyone else is already moving fast. Because standing still means frostbite, or worse, getting screamed at again. You shove your feet into boots that are still damp from yesterday's rain, and possibly something unholy. Your tunic smells like old stew, and failed ambition, your armor, if you have any, is stiff cold, and gives you the reassuring hug of an iron coffin. Someone kicks over a pot near the fire. It was your breakfast hoops. Guess you're skipping that again. The sky is still a dull grey smear, like God gave up halfway through painting the morning. There's fog, there's frost, there's the overwhelming scent of too many men, not enough soap, and an army's worth of digestive consequences from last night's turnip stew. Then there's shouting again. Orders flying like arrows, form up to arms. Where's my damn sword, you idiot? Everyone's barking, grunting, pushing. No one's calm, because at any moment someone might ride over the next hill and decide today is the perfect day for a surprise stabbing. You grab your gear, it's heavy, everything hurts, but you move because not moving gets you trampled, fined, or executed for desertion if your only plan was to finish peeing. And that's your morning. No sunrise, yoga, no coffee, no quiet scroll through your messages. Just frostbite, chaos, and a 50-50 chance you'll die before noon. Welcome to the start of your day. Soldier, only 14 more hours to go. So you've survived the morning chaos. Congratulations, your reward. A flashback to how badly you slept. because when you're a medieval soldier, sleeping is less about resting and more about strategic unconsciousness. And yes, your bed is a war crime in textile form. Imagine the hardest, lumpiest patch of ground you've ever sat on. Now soak it in rain, stomp it with boots, and toss on a threadbare wool blanket that smells like it was last washed during a solar eclipse. That's your bed. There's no mattress, no pillow, not even a flat rock to cradle your misery. If you're lucky you get hay, but remember, this is war hay, half rotten, boogen-fested and damp from the thousand unmentionable things that happened on it yesterday. Most nights, you don't even undress. There's no point. Stripping down means freezing to death before your shift ends, so you sleep in your clothes, your boots sometimes, even your armor, which, fun fact, is about as comfortable as hugging a refrigerator full of knives. Every joint you bend feels like you're being punished by the gods of metallurgy. And privacy hilarious, you sleep packed in with your fellow soldiers, like salted fish in a barrel. Elbow to elbow, knee to groin. If someone shifts in their sleep, they're either spooning you or accidentally headbutting your ribs. You don't even flinch anymore. It's just part of the experience. Let's talk about the wildlife. Rats, constant companions, they scurry across your chest at 3 a.m. like they own the place fleas already moved in. Lice, consider them your new hair roommates. You don't kill them, you just try to convince them to migrate to someone else's scalp. And yet, despite all this, you do sleep. Kind of, because exhaustion isn't optional. After marching 20 miles, digging trenches and dodging arrows, your body gives up. It collapses like a tavern drunk and drags your mind with it. You drift off, not with dreams but with numbness, and maybe the occasional twitch when someone yells in their sleep or farts with enough force to cause alarm. Then the cold sets in. Your blanket a glorified burlap sack is no match for the night air, which slices through the camp like a jealous ghost. You curl into yourself or into your neighbor or both, and just when you find a sliver of comfort, it's morning again, back to the shouting, the frost, and the ever-present fear of battle. So, yeah, that's what you slept on. No memory foam, no goose down, just dirt, damp wool, and the desperate hope you won't wake up with a spider in your mouth now that you're feeling incredibly well-rested. Sarcasm fully intended. Let's move on to what kept you awake all night. Night in the medieval camp is not a peaceful affair. It doesn't ease in gently. Like a lullaby, it crashes down like a tavern brawl. You'd think after a day of marching and stabbing things, soldiers would sleep silently. You'd be wrong. First, there's the snoring. Not regular snoring, we're talking battlefield-grade chainsaw symphonies from men who haven't cleared their sinuses since birth. One guy sounds like a drowning bear, another whistles through a hole in his tooth. You try to find a rhythm in it, maybe turn it into a song, but instead you just plot murder with your blanket over your head. Then there's the screaming. Not many things are more fun than being jolted awake by a man having a vivid dream about being stabbed again. Or worse, waking up to someone actually being stabbed because they wandered too far into the dark and met a less than friendly patrol. Either way, it's not relaxing. Oh, and the animals, ever heard a wolf howl just outside camp while you're trying to fall asleep on frozen ground next to a guy with onion breath? It's enchanting in a soul-crushing, existential dread kind of way. Horses snort, dogs bark, something hoots in the woods, and everyone collectively decides not to investigate. But wait, there's more. The wind whips through the tents like it's trying to start a fight. The fire crackles with the energy of someone about to go out. The occasional soldier, usually half drunk and lost, stumbles back from latrine duty trips over your legs and gives an apologetic grunt before collapsing face first into his own cloak. Every so often a night watch yells something that makes your blood run cold, movement to the east. Or who's there you sit up, heart-pounding eyes darting around for your sword until someone mutters, "Just a deer, go back to sleep," like that's a reasonable sentence in this context. But the worst sound of all, silence, because silence means something is wrong. Silence means the enemy is sneaking. Silence means you wake up to arrows, fire, or the sweet sting of your last mistake. So no night isn't restful, it's a gauntlet of noise, nerves, and nocturnal paranoia. And you do it all knowing tomorrow you'll need every ounce of strength to march, fight, and survive again. But hey, if you can sleep through snoring, screaming, and maybe a wolf, you can probably survive anything. So you've braved the snoring, survived the screaming, and somehow didn't get mauled by the maybe a wolf. But now it's time to talk about your greatest enemy in camp. Not hunger, not boredom, not even Jeff from Tent 3 who smells like a boiled onion. No, the true villain of your medieval military bedtime is the blanket. Calling it a blanket is generous. It's more like a scratchy square of suffering woven from pure regret and sheep that were clearly angry when they were sheared. Wool, yes, but not the cozy modern kind. This is untreated, unwashed, flea-infested medieval wool, the kind that smells like wet goat and feels like you're wrapping yourself in a scouring pad. You don't get to choose your blanket. You inherit it maybe from the last guy who used it until he died of frostbite or dysentery. It has stains, it has stories, it has a texture that exfoliates your soul. But you need it. Oh, do you need it? Because once the sun sets and the fire sputters out, the cold descends like a curse. It seeps into your boots, your bones, your bladder. You could be surrounded by 300 men and still feel like the last human left in a tundra made of mud and misery. And all that stands between you and hypothermia is this itchy rectangle of medieval despair. It never covers enough. One leg is always sticking out, daring the frost demons to nibble your toes. You try to tuck it, roll up in it, cocoon yourself like some desperate burrito of warmth. But the wool has other plans. It shifts, it slides, it betrays you, and when it rains, because of course it rains, your blanket turns into a wet rug that clings to your body like a needy ex and weighs as much as shame. You'd think the army would issue better supplies. They don't. Your commander has a fur cloak. You have wool that makes you question your will to live, and when it gets really cold, you and your fellow soldiers huddle together under a shared blanket, creating what can only be described as a medieval cuddle puddle. It's not weird, it's survival. No one talks about it afterward. Eventually sleep claims you, not peacefully, but like a mugging. You black out from sheer fatigue, teeth chattering, blanket barely helping. And when the morning bell rings, you peel the thing off like it's part of your skin, stiff, stinking, and already damp from the dew. You fold it, not out of pride, but out of obligation, because you'll need it again tonight, and the next night, and every cursed night until this war ends. So next time you wrap yourself in a comforter and sigh, happily remember this: your medieval counterpart was swaddled in misery, battling frostbite, with a rug made of wool, sorrow, and aggressive itch-sweet dreams. Still thinking about that blanket? Good, because now we get to talk about what went underneath it, if anything. Welcome to the medieval soldier's bedtime wardrobe, a chaotic blend of desperation, practicality, and body odor that could knock a pigeon out of the sky. Spider, they didn't have pajamas. No flannel pants, no oversized shirts, no fuzzy socks with little reindeer on them. If you were lucky, you had your undertunic. If you were unlucky, you were sleeping in your full kit, because taking it off meant exposing your pale, shivering flesh to the cold, the damp, and the judgmental stares of everyone else trying not to die. Let's start with armor. In theory, you're not supposed to sleep in it. Chainmail is heavy, noisy, and has the cuddling potential of a meat grinder. But here's the thing, if you take it off, you might not have time to put it back on that surprise enemy raid. It's not waiting for you to finish strapping up, so a lot of guys, they slept in it, or half in it, or with it, next to them like a murderous security blanket. Now let's talk linen. That's the fabric closest to your skeiner shift, maybe a tunic, probably not clean. Linen breathes, which is a fancy way of saying it soaks up sweat until it becomes its own sentient life form. Soldiers might strip down to this layer to sleep, but only if the weather allowed it, which, spoiler again, it usually didn't. Boots on always, because cold ground is the enemy, and if you wake up and have to run, there's no time to lace things. Plus, removing them is a gamble. The moment air hits your medieval feet, there's a very real risk of frostbite, trench foot, or releasing a smell so potent it counts as a war crime. So there you are, lying in your crusty linen shift, or wrapped in a full mail hauberk like a self-loathing sardine, covered by a blanket that hates you, surrounded by men doing the same. The smell is incredible, a rich stew of sweat, leather, mildew, and old campfire smoke. You breathe through your mouth and pray for unconsciousness. There are no wardrobes, no changing rooms, no fluffy robes, just layers, cold, and the constant creeping suspicion that you'll wake up with lice again, or maybe never wake up at all. So the next time you climb into bed wearing your cozy pajamas and matching socks, think of your medieval ancestor wrapped in steel and sadness, trying to not freeze to death, next to a guy named Bartram who won't stop muttering in his sleep, ready to face the next hardship. Then let's talk about the midnight ritual. No one wants to remember relieving yourself. So you made it through the night, you survived the screaming, the cold, the chainmail snuggle fest, and now nature is knocking on the door, and not politely, more like pounding with both fists while yelling, "Now!" Welcome to the medieval latrine experience, where the toilet is a hole in the ground, dignity is optional, and privacy is a fantasy reserved for monks and royalty. You don't get a bathroom, you get a trench, a communal one, dug, hastily used, heavily lined with the broken dreams of personal space. If you're on campaign, the trench is usually just outside the camp perimeter. Why? Because no one wants to sleep next to the smell, but also because you're expendable. Enjoy that peaceful moonlit walk through open ground where anyone, bandits, enemy scouts, wolves might be waiting for their moment to grip your dagger and your dignity and hope for the best. Once you get there, what do you find? A pit, maybe with a log across it, if someone's feeling fancy. No walls, no door, no seat, just wind, stench, and judgment from the guy squatting next to you. There's eye contact always. You try to avoid it, but it happens, and in that moment you both share a level of intimacy that no one ever talks about again. Toilet paper, adorable idea. You get moss if you're lucky, leaves if you're not, and your hand if all else fails. Some soldiers carry rags, most lose them, and once you're done, there's no sink, no soap, just a quick wipe on your tunic, a shrug, and maybe a prayer that whatever's on your fingers isn't contagious. Let's not forget about the smell. It's not just bad, it's weaponized. You've smelled death, you've smelled damp wool, but fifth, this is something else, a living fog of rot, fermented stew and despair. If the wind shifts while you're mid-squat, you'll gag so hard you might fall in, and yes, people do fall in, and no, they don't come back the same. There are also the charming traditions of latrine allegra PM, scratched onto wooden planks, rocks, or any surface nearby. Crude jokes, stick figures, dire warnings like "Don't trust the beef" or "Willem lost a boot here." Soldiers have always found time to be crude artists. It's how they process the horror. And remember, this is if you make it to the latrine. If you don't, well, pick a bush, dig a hole, hope no one sees, and absolutely positively never go near the commander's tent. They do not take kindly to surprise deposits. So next time you flush your porcelain throne and spritz lavender mist into the air, just remember your medieval counterpart was squatting over a trench in full view of 30 men while trying not to fall into a pit of steaming death before breakfast. Speaking of breakfast, so you've braved the latrine gauntlet, lived to tell the tale barely, and now your stomach is growling, not politely, it's staging a full revolt time for breakfast medieval soldier style. Lower your expectations. No bacon, no coffee, and absolutely no toast. The only thing getting toasted in this camp is your morale. Breakfast, if you can even call it that, is a grim exercise in chewing and pretending. You sit by the fire if someone managed to keep one lit overnight and someone ladles you a scoop of pottage. Remember that word, because it's your new best frenemy. Pottage is a catch-all slop of boiled grains, root vegetables, and anything vaguely edible thrown into the pot yesterday and the day before and last week. It's less of a meal and more of a bubbling food graveyard. Texture, lumpy temperature, suspicious taste, somewhere between wet bark and disappointment. It sticks to your spoon, your ribs, and probably your soul. If you're lucky, there's bread. Not warm, soft bakery bread. This is the bread of wardents, hard, possibly weaponizable. You don't bite into it, you gnaw, you negotiate. It has the texture of dried clay and the flavor of old sock, and yet you cherish it because chewing gives you something to do while pretending the stew doesn't have a feather in it. Meat rare, reserved for the highborn or the blessed few who caught a squirrel and didn't get arrested for poaching. Your protein likely comes in the form of boiled peas, or if fate is particularly cruel, something called salted fish. It tastes like seawater filtered through regret. It's been preserved so long, it's basically jerky's bitter older cousin. And drinks, no orange juice, no tea. You get ale, warm, flat, weak ale, because water is usually full of parasites, and beer at least tried to be boiled once. Soldiers drink it from dented cups, wooden bowls, or their hands. It's not refreshing, it's barely hydrating, but it won't kill you, which is really all you can hope for. You eat fast because the line behind you is long, the fire's dying, and you've got work to do, marching, drilling, not dying. You choke it down, wipe your mouth on your sleeve, and pretend you feel ready to face the day. So no, breakfast doesn't energize you, it just doesn't let you die of hunger. It's functional, joyless, and about as comforting as a slap from a frozen fish. And yet there's something strangely bonding about it. You and your fellow soldiers' teeth cracking on crossed eyes, squinting against the morning smoke, all share this one sacred ritual, complaining. Because in a world where everything hurts, smells, or wants to kill you, sometimes the only thing you have left is the right to loudly hate your breakfast. Ready to ruin your appetite even further, let's talk about what passes for lunch. so you've burned your tongue on questionable pottage, chipped a molar on siege bread, and washed it all down with beer that tastes like sadness. Welcome to midday in the medieval trenches. Now it's time for luncher, word that implies joy, variety, and flavour, none of which apply here. Lunch isn't a break, it's not a moment of rest or relaxation. It's a grim reminder that your stomach still works and life insists on feeding it. Whatever barely qualifies as food, you don't sit down with friends to laugh and share stories. You crouch, you hover, you shovel mystery mush into your face while hoping it doesn't crawl back out. First up, gruel is the low-effort cousin of pottage. It's watery, bland, and somehow still manages to have a texture. It's made from barley, oats, or millet, depending on what the quartermaster hasn't already burned or lost to rats. It slides into your bowl like a liquid sigh, and tastes like someone boiled regret and strained out the seasoning. On better days they might toss in a handful of boiled beans or lentils. On worse days you find a beetle or half a beetle. You eat it anyway because protein is protein, and you stopped caring 3 campaigns ago. Sometimes you get a vegetable that sounds nice, right, wrong, because that vegetable is almost always a turnip. The eternal root turnips are cheap, durable, and taste like the dirt they came from. You'll get them mashed, boiled, or burned, never seasoned, never kind. If you're incredibly lucky like didn't get dysentery this week, lucky someone might toss you a strip of dried meat. Usually it's so salted it could be used to tan leather. It takes 10 minutes to chew and twice that to digest, but you gnaw it like a starved animal because in this world you kind of are. There's no cutlery. You eat with your hands, your knife, or the communal spoon if you dare. Hygiene isn't a priority, flavor isn't a possibility, and complaints fall on deaf ears unless you're within earshot of the cook, who may be armed and always angry. Oh, and let's not forget the flies. They love lunch, they dance over your gruel, buzz around your face, and occasionally land directly in your bowl like it's a hot tub. You swat them away, but they always come back, just like your lunch. You eat fast. Not because you want to, but because flies are faster. Also, the next duty cycle starts soon, and if you're late, someone's yelling. Again, you lick your fingers, wipe them on your already filthy tunic, and try not to think about dinner. Lunch in the medieval army, a culinary low point in a life full of low points. And you're not even full. You're just not empty anymore. Now, how about a snack? Lunch is over. You're not full. You're not satisfied. And you're definitely not thrilled about the mystery gruel that may or may not be turning in your gut, but the day marches on. And so do you. Which means it's time to reach into your filthy satchel and pray for something to chew on between drills, shouts, and existential dread. Welcome to medieval snacking. Let's start with jerky. Dried meat so tough it could deflect a crossbow bolt. It's been salted within an inch of its existence and left hanging in someone's tent for at least a week, maybe 2. It doesn't bend, it cracks. You suck on it first like a desperate dog gnawing on a table leg, and then you chew like your life depends on it, because it kind of does. Jerky is protein. Protein is power. Power is not fainting during formation. If jerky is unavailable, and often it is, you might have cheese, but not the kind that melts on a burger or comes pre-sliced in tidy plastic. No, this cheese is hard, ancient, crumbly in a bad way. It is made from goat's milk, or sheep's milk, or a vague attempt at milk. It smells like old shoes and tastes like betrayal, but it's calories, so you eat it. Slowly between gags. Bread is also considered a snack, though at this point it's just a solid object you chew for entertainment. You bite, you tear, you swallow. It's less a food and more of a challenge. Sometimes you soften it with beer. Sometimes you soften it with tears. You do what you must. If you're out in the field and real desperate, you might find some nuts or berries. But that's a dice roll. Eat the wrong berry, and suddenly you're experiencing medieval intestinal roulette. So most soldiers just stick with what's safe, what's dry, and what doesn't come with visible mold. Unless they're past the point of caring, which, let's be honest, most of them are. There's also the occasional sweet, honeycomb, dried fruit, maybe a fig if a merchant passed through, and you didn't spend all your coin on dice or bandages. But those are rare, precious moments. A bite of sweetness in a world coated in grime. You savor it, you might even share, but only if you're feeling particularly generous and the guy next to you didn't fart directly into your blanket last night. You keep your snack stash wrapped in cloth, tied to your belt or stuffed into your gear. It's always crushed, always warm, and always smells vaguely like the last meal you dropped it next to, but it's yours. Your tiny, pathetic luxury in a world of mud and screaming. So you chew quietly, desperately, because battle is coming, and you'll need every crumb of strength you can find. Next, we venture into the chaos that is the army's version of a kitchen. You've nibbled your way through battlefield jerky and crumb, dusted regret, and now the smell of smoke and something vaguely edible leads you to the heart of the culinary underworld, the camp kitchen. Calling it a kitchen is generous. It's a collection of half-burned logs, 3 battered pots, and one guy named Fulk who's been put in charge because he once didn't burn a rabbit too badly. There's no pantry, no spice rack, just whatever the quartermaster scrounged up, dropped or forgot in the back of a cart 2 days ago. The fire, always smoky, never hot enough. It's a sad little flame that sputters in the wind like it's considering giving up. And frankly, no one would blame it. Every attempt to cook becomes a balancing act of undercooked despair and accidental cremation. The food, whatever you didn't finish yesterday, and whatever didn't crawl away in the night. There's stew again. Always stew. It's the go-to medieval dish because it hides sins. You don't know what's in it. You don't ask. One bite might have parsnip. The next, a piece of questionable meat. Is it rabbit, rat? Regret. Who's to say? If it came from an animal, Folks already diced it into unrecognizable chunks and declared it filling. Cooking gear is a joke. The knives are dull, the ladles are bent, the pots are crusted with a blackened ring of meals long dead scrubbing. With what mud hope? You just scrape it out and keep going. And then there's the smoke. Always in your eyes, always in your lungs. It clings to everything. Your clothes, your hair, your soul. You cough, you blink, and try not to fall in love with the idea of fresh air, because that's just not part of the medieval culinary package. Still, soldiers line up. They huddle around Fulk's cauldron with their wooden bowls and dented tin cups, hoping for something hot and vaguely edible. It's not about taste. It's about heat. Warm food feels like a miracle when your hands are stiff from the cold and your morale is thinner than the soup. Every now and then, someone gets clever, adds a wild herb, stirs in some leftover cheese, maybe finds a mushroom that probably isn't poisonous. For 5 glorious minutes, camp morale spikes, and then someone farts so loudly it shatters the illusion. You eat, you thank Fulk, out of pity mostly, and you shuffle off, belly half full, dignity entirely gone. The camp kitchen has fed you, betrayed you, and probably shaved 3 days off your lifespan, but it beats starving. Now that you've dined like a warrior, let's talk about how to eat like one on the battlefield, so you've survived. Fulk's stew, and your digestive system hasn't declared independence yet. But now it's time to learn how to eat like a medieval soldier. Not in the Michelin star way, more like the please don't stab anyone over a bone way. Forget napkins, forget forks, forget manners. In the medieval army, dining etiquette is mostly just try not to drool directly into the communal pot. Your hands are your utensils, your face is your plate and your knife. Your one all-purpose blade is doing triple duty as cutlery, weapon, and occasional toothpick. You hold your bowl in one hand, your dagger in the other, and your dignity nowhere to be found. Meals are loud, messy, and wildly territorial. There is no assigned seating. You sit where there's space, which is usually a log, a rock, or someone's shield. If you hesitate too long, a bigger soldier takes your spot and maybe your food too. This isn't a buffet. It's a survival of the fittest snack arena. And that food, it's unrecognizable at best, unholy at worst. Someone might wave a hand and say it's meat, but it could be anything from goat to pigeon to don't ask. If it has bones, you gnaw around them. If it has gristle, you chew until your jaw gives up. Spit it out, sure, but do it discreetly. You don't want to offend folk, he once cried when someone called his stew emotional damage in a bowl. Drinks, usually weak ale or mead, passed around in cups that haven't been washed since the last crusade. If you've got your own mug, guard it with your life. If not, you're sharing, and you will get a mouthful of backwash from a guy with suspicious gum disease and a violent sneeze. Conversations over meals are simple. War stories, complaints about boots, and speculation about what animal was just consumed. Occasionally, someone will start singing. It's rarely good. It is often obscene, but no one stops him because morale is already hanging by a thread and murder over music is frowned upon. Most of the time fights break out, not duels, just quick, elbow-throwing, bowl, snatching disputes over scraps of bread or whose foot touched whose ration. These end fast and dirty. A well-placed insult, a shove, and it's over, until the next meal. When you are done, there is no bin. You just toss bones in the mud, wipe your hands on your tunic, or someone else's, and move along. There's no dessert, no seconds, just the lingering taste of ash, mystery meat, and hard living. But you're fed, sort of. And in this life, sort of is good enough. Now that your belly's full of battlefield fine dining, it's time to discuss the one thing worse than cold food. Cold everything. You've eaten your questionable stew, wiped your hands on someone else's cloak, and now it's time to march, or more accurately stumble, into winter's waiting mouth, because nothing says military strategy quite like dragging an army through sleet, snow, and morale so low it could be mistaken for a trench. Winter campaigning is less military brilliance and more let's see who freezes to death last. You wake up stiff, your joints locked in place like rusty hinges on a barn door. Your breath fogs out in thick clouds, and your nose is half frozen but still manages to drip constantly. The ground beneath you is rock solid, except where it's turned into an ice, slush swamp designed specifically to swallow boots whole. Speaking of boots, yours are soaked always. The leather has long given up on being waterproof, and now they just function as mobile blisters filled with regret. Your socks, if you have any left, are more whole than fabric, and your feet alternate between numb and stabbing pain. Trench foot isn't just possible, it's basically expected. Your fingers? Useless. Try tying a strap with frozen hands that feel like you've replaced your bones with icicles. Tasks that took 10 seconds in summer now take 15 minutes, a few grunts, and 1 or 2 silent prayers to Saint Warmth, patron of the not dead yet. Cloaks are standard issue, but they're thin, soaked, and about as protective as wearing a wet towel layers, sure. If by layers you mean a lice-riddled tunic, a scratchy wool vest and desperation, some soldiers stuff straw under their armor to trap heat. Others just accept that they now make a crunching sound when they move. Either way, no one's comfortable. Everyone smells like fire smoke, old cheese, and frostbitten sorrow. And then there's the wind, a howling, cruel beast that punches straight through armor gaps and neck holes, targeting your soul. It doesn't blow, it cuts. It finds every exposed inch of skin and slaps it like it owes the weather money. You try to keep moving because stopping means freezing in place. Literally, you've seen it happen. One guy sat down to rest and never got back up. He looked peaceful. Cold but peaceful. They used his body as a windbreak the next day. Fires are rare luxuries. If you're lucky, you'll gather around one that smokes more than it flames. You'll hold your hands out and pretend the heat is reaching you. It isn't. But lying is a survival skill, and yet you keep going. Not because you're brave, because you're stuck. Orders are orders, even when your eyelashes are frozen together and your breath crackles like dry leaves. This is medieval winter warfare. No heat, no hope, and absolutely no hot chocolate. And just when you think it can't get worse. Simone sneezes loudly, wetly. And now it's time to talk about everyone's favorite camp guest, sickness. If the cold doesn't kill you, don't worry, there's always illness. Welcome to the part of camp life where every cough sounds like a funeral bell, and sneezing within 5 feet of someone is basically an act of war. Sickness spreads through a medieval camp faster than rumors at a tavern. You sleep in rows, shoulder to shoulder with men who haven't bathed in weeks, sharing the same air, same fleas, and sometimes the same mug. Hygiene isn't just lacking, it's offensive. There's no soap, no hand washing, and your version of sanitation is a latrine trench that everyone's pretending isn't overflowing. Spoiler, it is. So it starts small, a sniffle, a wheeze. Maybe a guy with a pale face and red-rimmed eyes trying to hide the fact that he just coughed up something that looked like a meat chunk. You laugh it off. Until the tent next to you is suddenly a lot quieter. Colds turn into fevers. Fevers turn into infections. Infections turn into men being carried out of the camp on stretchers made from broken spears. And whatever linen wasn't already being used to plug wounds. There are no antibiotics, no doctors. Just a guy with a rusty knife and a vague knowledge of which herbs probably won't kill you immediately. And don't even think about injuries. Step on a nail. Good luck. That foot's either getting cut off or turning black like a moldy apple. Get a gash in battle. Hope you enjoy weeks of pus, pain, and watching your skin bubble like stew. The treatment is usually wine, fire, and screaming, followed by lots more screaming. There's always someone coughing, someone vomiting. Someone shivering so hard they sound like a bag of bones being kicked down a staircase. And every morning you check the line, up to see who didn't make it through the night. Sometimes you just find an empty blanket and a pile of teeth. Sometimes the guy's still there, just not breathing anymore. The lucky ones sweat it out. They survive the shakes, the sores, the wheezing. They come back pale and thinner, but alive. The unlucky ones, they get buried, or, if digging is too hard in the frozen ground, tossed in a makeshift pit and blessed with a half-hearted prayer, mumbled by a soldier who's just trying not to catch whatever they had. Religion becomes a lot more appealing. When everyone around you is dying, men who haven't prayed in years suddenly start whispering to saints, clutching lucky charms, or bribing the camp priest with their last copper coin for a blessing. Just in case, because in the medieval ranks, sickness isn't just unpleasant. It's inevitable. It's part of the package, along with lice, frostbite, and the creeping suspicion that the stew might have had something to do with it. But hey, at least you're still alive. For now, time to get some rest, soldier. You're sick, cold, and running on stale bread fumes. Naturally, now's the time to sleep. Or at least attempt something that loosely resembles it while lying on frozen dirt next to 40 other conscious men and the occasional goat. Welcome to Battlefield Rest, the medieval version of a wellness retreat. If your wellness goal is don't die before sunrise, forget mattresses, forget pillows. Your bed is the same patch of ground where you dropped earlier from exhaustion. Maybe there's a bedroll, but it's been soaked through since last week's rain and smells like wet fur and regret. Your blanket is your cloak, and if you're lucky, you'll get to share body heat with someone who only mostly smells like old cheese. And yet, you try. You wrap your arms around yourself, curl up in a fetal position like a sad underfed potato, and close your eyes for 5 seconds. Then someone shifts nearby, and you're instantly awake, heart-pounding hand already on the hilt of your knife because no one really sleeps. Not properly, not when you are camped within striking distance of the enemy. Every rustle in the bushes, every branch that snaps, every distant horse whinny sounds like the beginning of the end. You rest with one eye open, ears on high alert, and a constant internal monologue that alternates between please. Let it just be a squirrel? And do I have time to run before being stabbed? Then there's the noise. Snoring, for starters. Not soft, human snoring. This is deep chesty, primal stuff. The sound of lungs soaked in smoke and bad ale. Someone always coughs. Someone always farts. Someone always mutters in their sleep about things that should not be muttered out loud. And someone always forgets how to shut up entirely. Plus, you're never alone. Ever. You sleep in shifts, in groups, in close proximity to men who steal your warmth, your space, and sometimes your boots. Trust no one. Especially if you've got dry socks. Dry socks are currency. Dry socks are power. Worse still, not often, but often enough to keep you terrified. You'll hear the horn blast, bolt upright with your limbs still asleep, and sprint toward battle half dressed, half awake, and 100% confused. If you are lucky, it is a false alarm. If not, well, time to find out how good you fight with bed hair and one boot. But occasionally, miraculously, you get 2, maybe 3 hours of uninterrupted sleep. And when you wake up still breathing, still in one piece, you count yourself among the blessed, a little more bruised maybe, a little more bitten, but alive. Because on the battlefield, sleep isn't rest, it's a gamble. You close your eyes not to recharge, but to make a deal with death and hope he's busy with someone else. And if the night doesn't kill you, morning just might. You made it through the night barely. Your back feels like you slept on a pile of rocks, because you did. Your shoulders ache. Your breath steams in front of you like you're part dragon and your fingers aren't moving. That's not dramatic flair. That's frostbite flirting with commitment. The cold is no longer a nuisance. It's a slow, creeping executioner. It doesn't stab. It seeps into your bones, your joints, your morale. It doesn't shout, it whispers. Take your boots off just for a minute. That's how it gets you. Never take off your boots. That's one of the first things you learn after marching through 3 days of sleet, ice, and shame. Your boots might be soaked. They might be chafing. They might be actively growing something that twitches. But once you peel them off, your feet swell like overcooked sausages. And good luck getting them back on before dawn. That's if you don't lose a toe or two in the process. Yes, literally soldiers, who give in to the temptation, usually don't make it past morning. You'll find them curled under cloaks, stiff as planks, One boot off, foot blue, eyes open, expression somewhere between relief and oh no. Cold is a liar like that. It feels better just before it kills you. There's no such thing as warming up. Fires are reserved for whoever's best at hoarding dry wood or pretending to be on guard duty near the blaze. Everyone else has to make do with friction, curses, and the occasional body huddle with someone they swore they'd never speak to again after the latrine incident. Layering. You have one set of clothes. 2 if you're elite. 3 if you're dreaming. And you're wearing all of them already. Wool that smells like regret, a crusted tunic, and maybe a tattered scarf that used to belong to someone braver or deader than you. Once the wet gets in, it stays. You're not so much dressed as marinated. And then comes the wind, the kind that stings your skin, claws at your eyelids, and convinces you your ears have snapped off. Helmets help a little, but mostly they just turn your head into a metal icebox. If you were hoping for ear protection, you should have been born into a warmer century. Every soldier knows someone who didn't survive the cold, not battle cold. Maybe they collapsed mid-march. Maybe they curled up just to rest. Maybe they just stopped caring. That's how it works. Cold doesn't just break your body, it erodes your will, inch by inch, breath by icy breath. But you're still here, boots on. Fingers mostly responsive, breath still puffing out like smoke signals to the gods of warmth. And tomorrow, if you're still breathing, you'll do it all again. Because the only thing worse than freezing to death is freezing while having to work. Your boots are still on. Your fingers haven't snapped off like icicles. Congratulations. You've made it one more day without becoming a camp corpse. But you are not warm, not even close. You are existing somewhere between alive and shivering sack of bones with a pulse. So now you enter the next phase of survival, getting warm. Not for comfort. That's gone. You're just trying to maintain basic biological function before you become a human popsicle with battlefield mileage. Let's start with fire, the golden god of camp life. Fire is everything, heat, light, hope. A distraction from the realization that your underwear is frozen to your thighs. The problem? There's never enough wood. Trees don't grow politely near battlefields. And when it rains, which it always does, the logs are soaked, the kindling is damp, and every attempt to spark a flame ends with a grown man sobbing into a pile of moss. If your unit's lucky, someone manages to coax a smoky, stubborn little fire into existence. It crackles weakly, like it's annoyed to be here. You huddle around it with 20 other men, all angling for the same pathetic inch of heat. Someone always hogs it. Someone else always complains. Eventually, somebody farts too close, and everyone has to reposition. Circle of life. Didn't make it to the fire in time. Good news, there's friction. That's right, the age-old technique of rubbing your limbs together like a desperate caveman trying to convince his body he's not dying. Hands under armpits, arms wrapped around legs, feet stomping until you can't feel them anyway. You look like you're performing the world's worst interpretive dance. But it beats freezing to death. Then we arrive at the last, most primal form of heat, cuddling. You can pretend it's not happening, but eventually the cold breaks everyone. You are a hardened soldier with 1,000-yard stare and blood on your boots. And yet here you are, spooning a man named Edgar who once tried to steal your last onion. Because at 3 a.m., Edgar is warm, and that's all that matters. There are no rules here, no shame, no hierarchy. Nobles and peasants alike turn into huddled meat, bundles of mutual desperation. You spoon whoever's closest. You become the little spoon without protest. You let someone tuck their freezing fingers under your shirt and you thank them for it. You stop caring about anything except not dying. And then morning comes, barely. The fire's out, the wind's back. Edgar's breath still smells like old onions. You groan, peel yourself off the human pile, and start the day again. Colder, grumpier, but technically not dead. Because in the medieval military, staying warm isn't about luxury. It's not even about comfort. It's about survival by any humiliating means necessary. You haven't felt your toes since Tuesday, but that's okay, because now it's time to march, fight, and carry plague. Filled equipment in a body held together by frost, fleas, and sheer pettiness. So you didn't freeze to death. You didn't get stabbed in the night. Your stew didn't kill you. The boots stayed on. You spooned Edgar. You lived. Congratulations. Now get up and do it all over again. Because in the medieval military, there are no gold stars for surviving yesterday. There are no breaks, no medals, no mental health days. There is just another round of misery waiting with your name scribbled on it in goat blood. Your reward for not dying marching. More marching, endless, soul-grinding, toe-blistering marching. No breakfast, no warm-up, no gentle wake-up call, just a barked order, a stiff body, and a path made of rocks, mud, and regrets. And you march in formation, which sounds orderly, but mostly means stepping in puddles someone else found with their face. The weather doesn't care if you're tired rain. Of course, snow, sure heat, why not you sweat? Freeze, chafe, blister and bleed all before noon. And the best part, you're probably doing this for a cause you only half understand. A border dispute between nobles you'll never meet. A king you'll never speak to. A war you didn't start, you're here because someone told you to be, and leaving is called desertion, which ends with a rope, a tree, and you being turned into a morale lesson. When you're not marching, you're digging. Trenches, latrines, ditches for tents you don't even have. The shovel is your second sword blisters, guaranteed. Then comes more guard duty, more patrols, more standing around in freezing wind, while trying not to fall asleep on your feet because falling asleep gets you slapped, stabbed, or left behind. And left behind in medieval warfare means either eaten by wolves or mistaken for a corpse. You're tired, always tired, a kind of tired that lives in your bones, the kind no nap will fix, but napping isn't an option anyway. There's work to do, there's always work to do. You see friends die, you see enemies rot, you learn to avoid attachments because names are harder to forget than faces. And most faces around you won't last long. You replace mourning with sarcasm, grief with silence, and prayers with very creative swearing. And through it all, your body rebels. Your knees grind, your back screams, your skin breaks out in rashes you can't name and don't want to examine, your teeth ache, your stomach flips and your bowels, well, let's just say they're not on your side anymore. But you don't complain, not because you're brave, because complaining changes nothing. The war keeps going, the orders keep coming, and you keep marching. Because you're a medieval soldier, and surviving one day is rare, surviving two, that's just stupid luck. Eventually your luck runs out. Maybe it's a stray arrow, maybe it's a fever that finally boils your brain, maybe it's slipping on a frozen latrine path and cracking your skull on a rock named Harold, doesn't matter. One day your body simply decides it's done being a miserable sack of bones trudging through filth and you die. And you're not alone, men drop like flies, battle doesn't even have to be involved. Some soldiers don't make it through their stew, others lie down for just a minute and never get back up A few don't even die. Dramaticust quietly vanish in the night, likely eaten by wolves, bandits. There's no ceremony, no flanks folded, no speeches. If someone bothers to remember your name, congratulations, you're above average. If not, you get a shallow grave, a rough wooden marker, or maybe just a boot sticking out of the mud until the next rainstorm washes you away. One less body to feed, one more warning for the recruits. But here's the strange part, sometimes you're remembered. Not the real you, not the lice-covered, soup-stained, frostbitten human being who once fell asleep on a dead pig for warmth. No, history doesn't care about him, but stories they do, and stories are all that's left when the last march ends. They'll say you were fearless, that you held the line when others fled, that you died heroically with your blade still in hand, even if in truth you were just trying not to wet yourself when someone yelled charge. They won't mention your bad knee, or the time you cried after biting into spoiled cheese, or how you once seriously considered defecting just to get warm socks. They'll turn your miserable death into glory, wrap it in poetry and chisel it into stone. Your pain becomes someone else's inspiration, your suffering recycled into honor. No one talks about the lice, the trench foot, the dysentery that nearly took you before the enemy even got a chance. That part gets left out. And maybe that's the only comfort left in this life. What's after it? You don't die for yourself. You die so some bard with a lute can make you sound like the sword-swinging god of winter warfare. You die so nobles can toast your name over wine that costs more than your in types and one whispers. It wasn't for nothing. Or maybe not. Maybe you're just another frozen body, one more skeleton in the mud boots, still on mouth open in permanent disbelief that this was the end. But if you're lucky, truly luck, your name survives not in history books, but around a campfire on the lips of some young soldier who heard about that guy who faced frostbite, fleas, famine, and folk stew and somehow made it to tomorrow. Because in the end, that's the only real legend left, not dying today. And if that's not heroism, then nothing in this frozen, lice-ridden war ever was. So there you have it. You've marched through mud, slept in frostbitten filth, eaten questionable meat from even more questionable pots, cuddled someone named Edgar out of sheer desperation, and narrowly avoided dying from dysentery, arrows, and soup. You didn't just survive a medieval campaign, you endured it, not with glory, not with honor, but with clenched teeth, frozen toes, and the hollow stare of someone who hasn't had a dry pair of socks since last harvest. And that really is the truth behind the armor. Medieval war wasn't a noble quest. It was cold, it was loud, it was wet. It was 90% waiting, 9% regretting, and 1% screaming. The battlefield didn't care about your dreams, it cared about whether you could walk one more mile on a twisted ankle and still swing a sword without your fingers falling off. Hollywood gave you heroes with perfect teeth and dramatic speeches. History gave you scabs, infections, and pants that haven't been washed since the last king died. So tonight, when you crawl into your clean bed under a soft blanket with a hot drink nearby and zero chance of being stabbed by candlelight, take a moment, close your eyes, and thank every ancestor who suffered through a life like this, so you wouldn't have to. You've survived the stew, the snow, the lice, and the latrines. You've lived, fought, and frozen to death like a true medieval soldier. Now turn on the heater, wash off the plague, and sleep like you didn't just share a blanket with a coughing peasant named Falk. Thanks for listening, sleep warm, you've earned it.